On a Tuesday morning that felt heavier than most, she pulled into the parking lot of Prestige Auto Group just after 8. The sky hung low and gray, matching the mood inside her chest. Her car, a silver sedan with more than 180,000 miles on it, creaked as she turned off the engine. The passenger side door didn't open smoothly anymore, and the radio only played static unless you smacked it twice. But it had gotten her through double shifts at the hospital, school pickups, grocery runs, and late-night drives when her mind wouldn't quiet down. Today, though, she wasn't sure it would make it back home. She smoothed her scrubs with tired hands, checked her reflection in the rearview mirror, hair pulled back, no makeup, dark circles under her eyes, and took a breath. She'd been saving for months. Not for something fancy, not even for something new, just something that wouldn't stall on the highway or leak oil in her driveway. Something that wouldn't force her to choose between fixing it and paying the electric bill. Inside the dealership, the air smelled like leather and floor polish. Bright lights glinted off rows of gleaming cars. SUVs with tinted windows, sedans with alloy rims, trucks that looked like they'd never seen a pothole. A few salespeople milled around laughing over coffee, dressed in crisp shirts and name tags that read things like, "Your trusted advisor." She walked toward the nearest desk, clutching a manila folder filled with printouts, her pay stubs, bank statements, a pre-approval letter from her credit union. She'd triple-checked everything. She knew her numbers. She wasn't asking for a handout, just a fair chance. At first, no one noticed her. She stood near a display of keychains and branded pens, shifting her weight from foot to foot. Finally, a man in a navy blazer approached, his smile polite but distant, like he was already calculating whether she was worth his time. "Can I help you?" he asked, not quite meeting her eyes. She nodded. "Hi, yes. I'm looking at used sedans, nothing too expensive. Maybe under 15,000. I have pre-approval and I've been pre-screened." He glanced at her scrubs, then at the folder she held out. Instead of taking it, he folded his arms. "We don't really do under 15 here," he said, voice flat. "This is a premium dealership." "I know," she said gently. "But you have a pre-owned section on your website. I saw a few models listed." He sighed as if she'd asked him to explain basic math. "Those are gone. Or priced higher now. Look, if you're not serious about something in the 30,000 range or above, you're wasting both our time." She blinked. "I am serious. I work full-time. I have a stable income. I just need a reliable car for my daughter and me." At that, his expression shifted, just slightly, but enough. His eyes flicked toward the door, then back to her, and something in his tone turned colder. "Lady, I've seen your type before. You come in here dressed like you're heading to a shift, act like you've got your life together, but then you vanish when it's time to sign, or you start crying about payments. We don't have the bandwidth for that." Her stomach dropped. She hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't demanded anything. She'd stood there calm and prepared, and still, he'd decided she was a problem before she'd even finished her sentence. "I'm not going to vanish," she said, voice steady despite the heat rising in her cheeks. "And I don't cry over payments. I pay my bills. Every single one." He stepped closer, lowering his voice but not his condescension. "Then prove it. Put down 10 grand right now and maybe we'll talk. Otherwise, please leave. You're making the other customers uncomfortable." She looked around. The showroom was nearly empty. One elderly couple browsed a minivan in the far corner, oblivious. No one was watching. No one cared. But she did. She cared about the way her hands trembled as she tucked the folder back under her arm. She cared about the fact that she'd taken an extra shift last weekend just to boost her savings. She cared that her daughter had asked just last night, "Mom, is our car going to die soon?" And she'd said, "No, sweetheart. It's got plenty of life left," even though she wasn't sure. She took a step back. "I came here in good faith," she said quietly. "I didn't ask for special treatment. Just respect," he snorted. "Respect is earned." And then, before she could respond, he reached out, not roughly, but with a firmness that left no room for argument, and guided her toward the exit like she was a stray dog wandering into a restaurant. The automatic door slid open. The cool morning air hit her face. Behind her, she heard him mutter to a colleague, "Another one who thinks a stethoscope makes her rich." She didn't turn around. She walked to her car, got in, and sat there for a full minute with her hands gripping the steering wheel. Her breath came fast. Not from anger, at least not only from anger, but from the crushing weight of being seen as less. Not because of what she did, but because of how she looked. Because she wore scrubs instead of a suit. because her shoes were scuffed, because she drove a car held together by hope and duct tape. As she pulled out of the lot, her phone buzzed. A text from her neighbor. Mira's school called. She forgot her lunchbox again. "Can you drop it off?" She sighed, swiped the notification away, and checked the gas gauge. Half a tank. Enough for the school, then work, then maybe the auto parts store if the engine light came on again. She thought about calling in sick. Just one day to breathe, to reset. But sick days meant unpaid hours. And unpaid hours meant choosing between groceries and the copay for Mira's asthma inhaler. So she drove. On the way to the school, she passed a billboard for Prestige Auto Group. Glossy, smiling families beside brand new SUVs. The tagline reading, "Your journey perfected." She almost laughed. Her journey wasn't glossy. It was oil changes in parking lots, second-hand winter coats, and falling asleep on the couch because bedtime stories turned into homework help turned into laundry. But it was hers, and it was honest. When she dropped off the lunchbox, Mira ran out to the car, gave her a quick hug, and whispered, "Thanks, Mom. You're the best." Those words, simple, sincere, anchored her. They always did. Back on the road, she let herself cry. Just a little. Quiet tears that didn't smear her vision. Just enough to release the sting of the morning. She wasn't ashamed of her life. She was proud of how far she'd come. But pride didn't stop a car from breaking down. And dignity didn't fill the gas tank. By the time she reached the hospital, her face was dry, her posture straight. She parked in her usual spot, grabbed her badge, and walked in like nothing had happened. But inside, a quiet resolve was forming, not about revenge, not about proving anyone wrong, but about refusing to let moments like this define her worth. She didn't know it yet. But tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow, everything would shift. But for now, in this ordinary Tuesday morning, she simply kept going, because that's what she'd always done. That night, after tucking her daughter into bed, after checking the window latch, fluffing the pillow one last time and kissing her forehead while she mumbled something about a dream with flying turtles, she sat alone in the kitchen. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of old floorboards settling. Outside, streetlights cast long shadows across the linoleum. She poured herself a glass of water, not because she was thirsty, but because doing something ordinary helped her feel grounded. She opened her laptop on the kitchen table. The screen's glow sharp against the dim room. Job listings first. Not because she wanted to leave nursing. She loved the work, the rhythm of it. The way a patient's eyes softened when you held their hand during a blood draw, but because maybe there was a clinic closer to home. Less driving, less wear on the car, less chance of getting stranded on some back road in the rain. She scrolled. Nothing promising. Most places wanted someone with 5 years' experience in a specialty she didn't have, or they offered part-time hours that wouldn't cover rent. She clicked over to the local classifieds, then to a used car forum. Someone was selling a 2016 Corolla with low miles. Runs great, needs new tires. She noted the number but didn't call. Not yet, she needed to sleep on it. Needed to see if the bank would approve a small personal loan. Needed to pretend just for a few hours that she wasn't one breakdown away from real trouble. Her mind kept circling back to the dealership. Not the car, not even the sales guy's words, though those stung, but the look in his eyes. Like she was invisible until she became an inconvenience. Like her presence was a mistake. That was the worst part. Not the rejection, but the erasure. As if her life, the early mornings, the missed birthdays, the careful budgeting, didn't count for anything because it wasn't wrapped in luxury. She thought about how far she'd come. 8 years ago, she'd walked out of a marble-floored penthouse with nothing but a duffel bag and her daughter in her arms. No dramatic fight, no slammed doors. Just a quiet "I can't do this anymore" and a taxi waiting downstairs. Back then, people had called her foolish. "You're throwing away security," they'd said. "He provides everything." But security wasn't worth much when you felt like a ghost in your own life, smiling at dinner parties, wearing designer clothes that never quite fit right, nodding along while decisions about your future were made without you. She'd chosen freedom instead. Messy, uncertain, exhausting freedom, and for the most part, she didn't regret it. She'd learned to change a flat tire. She'd memorized every coupon in the Sunday paper. She'd stayed up all night with a feverish child, singing off-key lullabies until dawn. Those moments weren't glamorous, but they were hers. real, earned. Still sitting there in the dark kitchen, doubt crept in. Was she strong enough to keep doing this alone? Not just the practical stuff, the bills, the repairs, but the emotional weight of always being the one who holds it together. Her daughter never saw her cry, never saw her panic when the credit card declined at the pharmacy. She made sure of that. But who held her when she needed it? She closed the laptop, stood up, walked to the window. The city lights blinked in the distance, indifferent and constant. She remembered something her grandmother used to say. You don't need a crown to be a queen. You just need to stand tall when the wind blows. She tried to stand tall. She really did. But sometimes the wind felt like it was coming from every direction at once. Her phone buzzed on the table. A notification from the school app. Reminder, parent-teacher conference tomorrow, 3:30 p.m. She sighed. She'd have to leave work early. That meant losing 2 hours of pay. But she wouldn't miss it. Never. She'd once walked 3 miles in the snow to make it to a school play because her car wouldn't start. Her daughter had spotted her in the audience and waved so hard she nearly fell off the stage. That look, pure joy, pure trust, was worth more than any paycheck. She thought about calling her sister, just to hear a friendly voice. But it was late and her sister worked nights too. Besides, what would she say? I got kicked out of a car dealership today. It sounded ridiculous out loud. Embarrassing. She didn't want pity. She wanted a solution. So she did what she always did, made a list. On a scrap of paper torn from a grocery receipt, she wrote, call credit union in the morning too. Check bus routes near new clinic, just in case. 3. Ask neighbor about borrowing his Torx wrench. Or pack lunch for Mira. No more forgotten boxes, simple things. Manageable things. Things she could control. She washed the glass, wiped the counter, turned off the light. As she walked down the hall to her bedroom, she passed her daughter's door. It was slightly ajar. She peeked in. Mira was curled on her side, one arm wrapped around a stuffed rabbit, breathing slow and steady. The sight softened something inside her. This was why she kept going. Not for applause, not for recognition, but for this quiet peace. For the chance to give her child a life full of safety, kindness, and small joys. Back in her own room, she changed into an old t-shirt and climbed into bed. The mattress sagged in the middle, but it was hers. She stared at the ceiling, listening to the night sounds of the building. The muffled TV from downstairs, a dog barking blocks away, the distant wail of a siren. She thought about the man she used to be married to. Not with anger, not with longing, but with a strange kind of clarity. He hadn't been cruel, just distant, like she was part of the furniture, necessary but not seen. After the divorce, he'd sent checks for a while, then stopped when she returned them. She'd made it clear, she didn't want his money. She wanted her independence, and he'd respected that in his own detached way. They hadn't spoken in years. She didn't even know if he knew how old their daughter was now. She wondered, briefly, what he'd think if he saw her today, standing in that showroom, holding her folder like a shield, being told she didn't belong. Would he be surprised? Disappointed? Or would he just nod as if he'd always known she'd end up like this? She pushed the thought away. It didn't matter. His opinion hadn't mattered in a long time. What mattered was tomorrow. The conference, the job search, the car, the endless quiet work of building a life one honest day at a time. She rolled onto her side, pulled the blanket up to her shoulders, and closed her eyes. Sleep didn't come right away, but eventually it did, light and fitful, filled with dreams of open roads and engines that purred like contented cats. And in the morning, she'd wake up, make breakfast, pack lunches, and face the world again, because that's what she did. Not because she was fearless, but because love was stronger than fear. And her daughter was worth every hard thing. The morning sun hadn't even crested the rooftops when the black Rolls-Royce pulled up to Prestige Auto Group. It didn't honk. It didn't idle loudly. It simply glided to a stop in the center of the lot, like it belonged there more than the cars on display. The paint gleamed under the pale light, so dark it looked like liquid night. A few early bird sales staff paused mid-sip of coffee, eyes widening as the driver's door opened. Out stepped a man in a charcoal overcoat, shoulders squared, hands tucked in his pockets. He wasn't flashy, no gold chains, no designer sunglasses, but there was something about the way he moved that made people instinctively straighten up. Calm, certain, like he'd walked into 1,000 rooms just like this and never once been made to feel small. He didn't head for the showroom. Instead, he walked slowly toward the front entrance, stopping exactly where the pavement met the glass doors. He stood there for a long moment, silent, scanning the spot like he was reading invisible words written into the concrete. Then he turned, taking in the entire facade, the banners, the logo, the rows of expensive vehicles, his expression unreadable. Inside, the same sales manager from the day before was adjusting his tie in the mirror behind the reception desk. He'd already forgotten about the woman in scrubs. To him, she was just another Tuesday inconvenience, a blip in an otherwise routine week. He was reviewing a new luxury SUV brochure when someone tapped him on the shoulder. Boss? A junior associate whispered, voice tight. There's someone outside, in a Phantom, and I think he's looking for you. The manager frowned. Who is it? I don't know, but he's just standing there, not smiling, not moving. Curious now, the manager smoothed his blazer and stepped outside, pasting on his best high-net-worth client smile. Good morning, sir. Welcome to Prestige Auto. How can I? The man cut him off with a single look, not angry, not loud, just final. The woman you threw out yesterday, he said, voice low but clear. She's the mother of my child. The manager's smile froze. His throat went dry. I don't know what you're talking about. You do, the man said, stepping closer. You told her she wasn't serious, that she was wasting your time, that she didn't belong here. He paused, letting the words hang in the crisp morning air. A delivery truck rumbled past on the street, but otherwise the lot was eerily quiet. And you're right, the man continued. She doesn't belong here, not because she can't afford your cars, but because she's got more integrity in her little finger than this whole place has in a year. She works 12-hour shifts saving lives while you stand here judging people by their shoes. The manager opened his mouth, then closed it. Sweat beaded at his temple. I didn't mean, he started. Save it, the man said. I'm not here to argue. I'm here to make sure you and everyone who works here never forget what happened yesterday. Because that woman, she's the only person I've ever truly respected, and you treated her like trash. By now, a small crowd had gathered near. The showroom doors, salespeople, office staff, even the finance manager. No one spoke. No one moved. They just watched as the man in the overcoat turned and walked toward the main entrance, not waiting for an invitation. He didn't ask for a tour, didn't glance at price tags. He walked straight to the owner's office, introduced himself by name, no title, no theatrics, and requested a private meeting. Within minutes, the regional director was on a video call. Corporate headquarters was alerted. And the sales manager? He was asked to wait in the break room, his name badge already removed by HR. Meanwhile, back at the apartment complex across town, she was pouring cereal into a bowl, humming softly as her daughter chattered about a drawing she'd made in art class. She had no idea what was unfolding at the dealership. No idea that the past, so carefully tucked away, was walking through glass doors in a tailored coat, speaking her name like it still meant something. She dropped her daughter off at school, kissed her goodbye, and headed to work. The car sputtered once on the highway but held together. She made a mental note to check the spark plugs that weekend, maybe borrow her neighbor's socket wrench. Life went on, as it always did, but at Prestige Auto Group, everything had shifted. The man didn't raise his voice during the meeting. He didn't threaten lawsuits or demand headlines. He simply laid out the facts. His daughter's mother had come in good faith, prepared and respectful, and had been humiliated for no reason other than how she looked. He asked two things. First, that the employee responsible be held accountable. Second, that the dealership take real steps to ensure this never happened again, not just to her, but to anyone who walked through those doors hoping for a fair chance. By noon, an internal memo had gone out. By 2, corporate issued a public statement. The sales manager was terminated effective immediately. Mandatory bias and customer service training would begin the following week. And in her name, though She hadn't agreed to it yet. A brand new reliable sedan would be donated to a local nonprofit that supported single parents rebuilding their lives. But the man didn't stop there. After the meetings, he drove the Rolls-Royce not to an office, not to a private club, but to a modest apartment complex on the east side of town. He parked a few spaces down from a silver sedan with duct tape on the bumper. He didn't go to the door. He knew better than that. Instead, he leaned against his car, hands in his pockets, and waited. He didn't have to wait long. Around 6 that evening, she came out to take the trash to the bin near the parking lot. She saw him immediately. Her steps slowed. Her breath caught. 8 years. 8 years of silence, of building a life without him, of teaching their daughter about kindness and hard work without ever saying a bad word about him. And now here he was, standing beside a car worth more than her building. She didn't run, didn't flinch. She just stopped a few feet away, trash bag in hand, eyes steady. "I saw the video," he said quietly. She blinked. "What video?" "Your daughter recorded part of it. On your phone. While she was waiting in the car." She hadn't known. She'd been too shaken to check the phone after the incident. Now she remembered. Mira had been fiddling with it in the back seat, saying something about making a movie. "I didn't call you for help," she said, voice calm but firm. "I know," he replied. "I didn't come to fix your car or give you money. I came because someone needed to remind them, and maybe remind myself, that you've always been enough. More than enough." She looked at him then. Really looked. He was older, tired around the eyes. The arrogance she remembered was gone, replaced by something quieter. Regret? Respect? Maybe both. "I'm not the same person I was," he said. "Neither am I," she answered. They stood there in the fading light. Two people bound by a child and a past they'd both tried to outrun. No drama, no accusations, just the truth, plain and simple. And for the first time in years, it didn't feel heavy. It just felt human. She didn't say much that evening. After the brief exchange in the parking lot, she nodded once, turned, and went back inside. He didn't follow, didn't knock, just got into his car and drove away, leaving behind only the faint scent of leather and the quiet hum of expensive tires on pavement. She stood by the window for a long time after, watching the street until the last trace of the Rolls-Royce disappeared around the corner. Her daughter was already in bed, unaware that the man in the photo on the bookshelf, the one labeled Dad long ago, had just been standing outside their door. She didn't feel angry. Not exactly. More like unsettled. Like the ground beneath her had shifted in a way she couldn't quite name. She'd built her life on the idea that she didn't need anyone. Not really. Not after walking away from everything that came with his name, his money, his world. She'd prided herself on doing it alone. The late shifts, the budget meals, the patched-up shoes, the nights spent studying for certifications while her daughter slept. And she'd done it well. Better than she ever thought possible. But now, someone had stepped in. Not to rescue her, not to take over, but to say, simply, you deserved better. And that, more than anything, cracked something open inside her. The next morning, her phone buzzed before her alarm even went off. A local news station had picked up the story. Not from her, she hadn't spoken to anyone, but from a staff member at the dealership who'd seen everything and couldn't stay quiet. The headline read, "Dealership fires employee after single mom humiliated. Billionaire X steps in." She groaned and turned off the notification. She didn't want this. Didn't want to be a headline. Didn't want people thinking she'd orchestrated some grand reunion for attention or gain. At work, a nurse's aide handed her a coffee and said, "Saw you on the news? You okay?" She forced a smile and said she was fine, but inside she felt exposed, like her private struggle had been turned into public theater. She hated that. Her dignity wasn't a spectacle. It was something quiet, something she carried every day without fanfare. Still, as the day went on, messages started coming in, not from strangers, but from people she knew, a former neighbor, a college classmate, even her old high school teacher, all of them saying the same thing. You handled that with grace. We're proud of you. One woman, a single mom herself, wrote, I've been through something similar. Thank you for making them see us. That last one stuck with her. Later that week, she met him again, not by accident, but by choice. He'd sent a short text. Can we talk? Just 10 minutes. No expectations. She almost didn't reply. But then she thought about Mira, about the questions that would eventually come, about the truth that deserved to be told gently, honestly, without bitterness. They met at a quiet park near the river, far from cameras, far from judgment. He arrived early, sitting on a bench with 2 paper cups of tea, her favorite kind, the one with honey and lemon. He remembered. She sat beside him, not too close, not too far. I didn't come to reinsert myself into your life, he said right away, as if reading her mind. I came because I saw how they treated you, and it reminded me of how I used to treat you, like your worth depended on what you wore or how much you earned. And I'm sorry for that, truly. She looked at the river, the water moving steadily, never rushing, never stopping. I forgave you a long time ago, she said softly. Not for your sake, for mine. Holding on to that hurt would have weighed me down. He nodded. I know, and I'm not asking for forgiveness now. I'm just glad you're okay, that Mira's okay. They talked then, not about the past, not about money, but about their daughter. Her laugh, her love of drawing, the way she insisted on wearing mismatched socks for good luck. For the first time in years, they weren't exes. They were just 2 parents sharing something precious. He told her about the changes at the dealership, the training, the donation, the new policy requiring all staff to undergo empathy workshops. It's not perfect, he said, but it's a start. She didn't ask about the car they'd offered in her name. She already knew what she'd say. A few days later, she called the nonprofit herself. Not to accept the vehicle, but to redirect it. Give it to someone who needs it more, she told them. Someone who doesn't have a support system. Someone who's one breakdown away from losing their job. They agreed. And in her name, quietly, without fanfare, they did. She never took a dime from him. Never asked for anything, but something had changed. Not in her circumstances, but in how she saw herself. She realized that accepting help didn't make her weak. Standing up for herself didn't make her difficult. And being treated with basic respect wasn't a privilege. It was a right. She started writing. Not for fame, not for money, but because she had things to say. She created a small online space where working parents could share their stories. About job interviews in thrift store blazers. About choosing between medicine and groceries. About the quiet courage it takes to keep going when no one's watching. It grew slowly but steadily. Not because of drama, but because it was real. People wrote to her. Your words made me feel seen. I thought I was the only one. Thank you for saying it out loud. And that meant more than any luxury car ever could. Back at the hospital, she kept doing her job, checking vitals, comforting scared patients, charting through the night. But now when she walked into a room, she stood a little taller. Not because someone had defended her, but because she finally believed, deep down, that she'd always been worthy of respect, just as she was. One afternoon, while waiting for the bus after a long shift, she saw a woman in scrubs being turned away from a rental office. The woman looked tired, defeated. Without thinking, she walked over. Hey, she said gently. Need help figuring something out? The woman looked up, surprised. I need a place close to the hospital. But they want first, last, and a deposit. I only have half, she nodded. I know a landlord who works with nurses. Let me call him. As she dialed, she realized something. The circle was widening. One act of kindness, one moment of seeing someone clearly. That's how things changed. Not with grand gestures, but with small, steady choices to treat each other like human beings. And that, more than anything, was the real victory. Months passed and the headlines faded. The news cycle moved on to flashier scandals and louder voices. But in her world, things kept changing. Not in dramatic bursts, but in quiet, steady ways, like roots growing under the soil, unseen but strong. She never accepted the car offered in her name. Instead, she bought her own. A modest, fuel-efficient sedan with good mileage and a clean engine history, paid for with her savings, a small loan, and the pride that came from knowing every dollar had been earned with her own hands. The day she drove it off the lot, she didn't feel like she'd made it. She just felt relieved, safe, like she could breathe a little easier knowing her daughter wouldn't have to walk home from school. If the car broke down, She kept working at the hospital, still in scrubs, still pulling doubles when needed. But something had shifted inside her. She walked into rooms with her shoulders back, not because she was trying to prove anything, but because she finally believed, deep in her bones, that she belonged wherever she chose to be. It wasn't about wealth or status. It was about the quiet certainty that her work mattered, her care mattered, and she mattered exactly as she was. Her little online space grew, not into some viral empire, but into a real community. Nurses, teachers, delivery drivers, custodians, people who showed up every day, often unseen, often underpaid, began sharing their stories. Not for pity, but for connection. One wrote about riding 3 buses to get to her night shift after her car was repossessed. Another shared how she'd gone back to school at 42 while raising twins. There were no filters, no polished captions, just raw, honest moments of struggle and resilience. And people responded. Not with empty "you go, girl" comments, but with real support. Job leads, childcare swaps, even a fundraiser that helped a single dad fix his transmission so he wouldn't lose his warehouse job. She never posted about her ex. Never mentioned the Rolls-Royce or the dealership drama. That wasn't the point. The point was the everyday dignity of people trying their best. And that, she realized, was the real story all along. He stayed in the background as he'd promised. He didn't show up unannounced, didn't send expensive gifts, but he did start attending their daughter's school events, quietly, respectfully, always sitting in the back row. At the spring talent show, when their daughter stumbled over her lines during a poem recital, he didn't look annoyed or embarrassed. He just smiled, clapped a little louder than everyone else, and later told her, "You were brave up there." She beamed. That night she asked her mom, "Does Dad come to all my things now?" She'd answered simply, "He's trying," and that's okay. There was no grand reconciliation, no fairy tale ending, just 2 adults learning, slowly, how to coexist for the sake of the child they both loved, and that was enough. One Saturday morning she decided to visit a different dealership. Not Prestige Auto Group, she had no interest in going back there, but a smaller family-run lot on the other side of town. She'd heard they treated people fairly, no matter what they drove in. She parked her new car, took a breath, and walked in. This time, the salesperson, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a name tag that read Linda, greeted her with a warm, "Morning." Looking for anything specific? No judgment. No assumptions. Just a genuine question. "I'm actually just browsing," she said, "but I appreciate the offer." Linda nodded. "Take your time. Coffee's fresh if you want some." She wandered the lot, looking at sedans and compact SUVs, not because she needed another car, but because she wanted to prove something to herself, that she could walk into a place like this and be seen as a person, not a stereotype. And she was. Linda checked in once, offered a brochure, and left her to look. No pressure. No performance. As she stood by a silver hatchback, she thought about how far she'd come, not just in miles driven or dollars saved, but in the quiet confidence that had grown inside her. She wasn't defined by that moment of humiliation anymore. It was just one chapter in a much longer story, one filled with late-night study sessions, scraped-together meals, bedtime stories, and the fierce, unshakable love for her child. Later that week, she got an email from the nonprofit that had received the donated car. The woman who got it, a home health aide raising 3 kids, had written a thank you note. "Because of you," it read, "I didn't lose my job. My kids didn't go without. You gave me more than a car. You gave me hope." She cried then, not out of sadness, but out of something deeper, gratitude. Maybe, or the realization that pain, when shared honestly, can become a bridge. Life didn't suddenly become easy. Bills still came. Shifts were still long. Some days she still felt tired down to her bones. But now she knew she wasn't alone. And more importantly, she knew her worth had never depended on anyone's approval. Not a sales manager's, not society's, not even her own doubts. One evening, as she and her daughter washed dishes side by side, Mira asked, "Mom, are we rich?" She paused, sponge in hand. "What do you think?" "I don't know. We don't have a big house or fancy clothes. But we have each other. And you always say we have enough." She smiled. "That's right. We have enough. And sometimes that's the richest thing of all." Mira nodded, satisfied, and went back to scrubbing a plate. In that simple moment, everything made sense. Success wasn't measured in luxury cars or bank accounts. It was in the quiet strength of showing up day after day, in teaching your child that kindness matters more than appearances, in standing tall not because the world applauds you, but because you know who you are. And as she dried her hands and looked out the kitchen window at the setting sun, she felt it, not triumph, not revenge, but peace. The kind that comes from living honestly, loving deeply, and never letting anyone convince you that you're less than you are. The road ahead would have bumps, sure, but this time she knew her car would hold, and so would she.